Okay, so I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar on combating wildlife trafficking. Our moderator, Mrs. Falesingoma, is having some technical issues, so I will take over for now and just get the meeting started because we are already 10 minutes past. Could you just go back, please, Falesi? Banal, please. Okay. So we kindly ask that you ensure that your microphone and your camera are switched off. And if you have any questions, you can put them on the chat below, and they will be answered at the end of the presentations. And please, next slide, Banel. I will quickly introduce our presenters. So first we have Chris Jogger, who has 2 decades of experience developing and implementing strategies to address transnational organized crime and terrorism. So he was working in senior roles across governments, universities, and international organizations, including NATO, the EU, and the United Nations. His portfolio is diverse, with his expertise spanning different aspects of intelligence tradecraft. In the recent years, he has, however, focused on helping countries confront the illegal wildlife trade. He serves as a trustee to the Earth Synergy Initiative and director of Travis. So welcome, Chris. Our second presenter is Miriam Nasilele, a behavior change communicator dedicated to conservation in Zambia and Southern Africa. She has expertise in project management, strategic communications. She blends data-driven insights with creative interventions to advance environmental action and sustainable development. Her work spans across grassroots mobilization to policy advocacy, using behavior change to strengthen biodiversity resilience. She designs storytelling-led interventions. She builds partnerships that empower communities, especially women and youth, and she's all around focused on protecting the environment. She is the communications manager for WCP Zambia and is leading the communications teams and oversees the Worth More Alive and This Is Not a Game campaigns. So welcome, Miriam. Our next presenter is Geoffrey Cheriot. He is the Chief Fire Officer at JKAA and a seasoned fire and disaster management professional. He has over 20 years of experience in leadership in the RFF services. He excels in emergency response coordination, airport operation, and disaster preparedness. Strong knowledge also of ICAO and KCA regulations. He collaborates with multi-agency teams on safety, security, and wildlife management, and serves on the illegal wildlife trafficking subcommittee. Results-driven leader, he has developed the airport emergency plans, trains multidisciplinary teams, and also upholds international aviation standards. Geoffrey is committed to risk reduction, capacity building, and strengthening community and organizational resilience. So these are the 3 presenters, and as you can see, they have a very different backgrounds, very different careers, and this shows the importance of collaboration and cross coordination when it comes to tackling this issue of wildlife trafficking. So without further ado, Banal, if you can move on to the first speaker.
Thank you, Yasin. Yes, Chris will be sharing his slide. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you also to ACI Africa for the opportunity and for taking the initiative to focus on environmental issues and the illegal wildlife trade, especially timely as this sits right in the centre of the current COP20 CITES meeting, which I hope you've been following. If you haven't followed, there's plenty of public information being shared about the progress of that important meeting. And also thank you to my two other panelists, speakers. It's great to sit in amongst such a diverse speaking team. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview of a few different subjects and talk about some of the work that's been taking place with airports between the conservation community and so give a couple of case studies. So just to say a few words about the status quo in airports from the perspective of law enforcement. The emphasis, of course, is on physical security and passenger safety. And there hasn't been that much opportunity over the years for law enforcement to develop its capabilities in airports. It's difficult to use airports as an opportunity to derive intelligence. You have a very small time window that passengers are moving through, and of course, the free and an easy movement of those passengers is priority. So historically, there's been little or no law enforcement in departures from an organised crime perspective, except for that of physical security and passenger safety. So most of law enforcement tends to sit on arrivals through customs and immigration. Just a few positive and optimistic words, and just to paint the picture globally in terms of developments in tackling transnational organised crime and terrorism. Since the 1970s, there's been a large number and an increasing pace of conventions and laws and instruments to tackle serious and organised crime, transnational crime. And many of those instruments, laws and conventions assist the work that we would wish to do in airports. There was a spike, especially in the mid-90s through to the mid-2000s, where law enforcement really were empowered. And of course, now when it comes to environmental crime, some of the key global agencies such as Interpol, Europol, World Customs Organization, UNODC, and then geographically based groups such as the African Union, subgroups within Africa. There are scores of specialist national government agencies now, especially designed to tackle organized crime. And just as an interesting point, there's an estimated 14,000 conservation agencies now. But if you were to date back to prior 1970, there were very few organizations that were specialists in dealing with organized crime, and then as a subset, the illegal wildlife trade within it. So the world is empowered to do something. And specifically, these conventions, laws, and instruments have raised political will and public awareness. They've helped generate the resources necessary to address the threats. They've been designed to allow alignment between international, regional, and national strategies. They've allowed us to build competent specialist agencies that are dedicated to these subjects and that are allowed to work across sector, also with the private sector. And they've been designed to gather intelligence to share strategic picture and then to investigate using sophisticated covert techniques. Of course, to tackle transnational organised crime, we need to be as smart and as sophisticated as they are. So we need the laws and the tools to do that. And then very importantly, this convention, these laws, these instruments allow us to share information, intelligence, and evidence. And specifically about the illegal wildlife trade, and just as a caveat, this is a very large and complex subject. There are, scores, thousands of different species. Just about every part of the world is in some way involved. The way in which there is negative impact from the illegal wildlife trade really varies. It's very diverse and it touches on lots of other aspects of security, the economy, trade, tourism. So health, it really is a complex subject. But just to say a few words, generally, the international community estimates that it's now the fourth largest illicit trade following drugs, firearms, and human trafficking. In the last 20 years, I've seen in my own lifetime a real increase in terms of how the illegal wildlife trade is prioritized by law enforcement, which has been great to see. There's now many specialist environmental crime, wildlife teams embedded within law enforcement, and that includes Interpol, Europol, World Customs Organization, the UNODC. However, unlike some other aspects of transnational organized crime, such as perhaps cocaine or heroin trafficking, the volume of data is still fairly limited, although there have been very significant improvements over the years. But the baseline analysis from which we understand the illegal wildlife trade is still in need of significant investment. And perhaps if there's one other sort of high level observation I would make is that whilst the policies are there to empower law enforcement to take action, those aren't always matched with the operational priorities. Other forms of criminality are still taking the resources that perhaps should now be shared to allow us to address the illegal wildlife trade more seriously. I'd like to just say a few words about the role of the conservation community in particular when it comes to addressing the illegal wildlife trade. And I can't overstate just how important they've been in putting the spotlight on this subject and helping law enforcement to understand the problem. As mentioned, there's some 14,000 conservation agencies out there now, many with overlapping mandates, some with unique and niche perspectives. But they've been critically important in helping law enforcement develop their strategies, to build capacity through training and coaching, to raise awareness both publicly and within governments, to lobby for the right sort of policy environment, the right laws, to build knowledge more generally. Many of these conservation agencies are doing incredibly important work in their research to understand the illegal wildlife trade and also the legal trade of wildlife. And perhaps just to mention, there are so many conservation agencies out there doing great work, but just to highlight a couple that I'm familiar with that have been working in airports specifically, and I put links in the chat to some of these organizations. We have Traffic, which was founded in the early 1970s, and together with its partner WWF, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, they were running perhaps the most significant investment into airports from a project perspective that's ever taken place, and it was known as the Roots Partnership. And I've put a link in the chat there, and there's plenty of online educational material for staff working in airports who are interested in learning more about the illegal wildlife trade on that Roots website. So I highly recommend that you take a look at that. And then something more current, together between Traffic, WWF, the Royal Foundation, of which we have a representative here today, and a number of other partnerships with airports, IATA. These two organizations, Traffic and WWF, have also been leading the way in a very innovative space, which was to try and to develop tools that could be deployed in airports to detect the movement of wildlife, and then to create the reactions to perhaps seize or investigate when those things are detected. So some excellent work has been conducted by those two particular agencies. I'd now like to just say a few words about one particular case study, which I think is a very important project for West Africa. And it was known as Wabileb. There's plenty about it on the internet. You can read about this project. It only just recently came to an end. And this was an effort that actually dates back nearly 10 years. But the last few years, there's been a particular emphasis in building multi-agency, cross-sectoral teams. So that's between government and the private sector, especially those involved in transport, logistics, and also banking, to build teams in a handful of West African countries that are competent, fit for purpose, and set up for success for addressing the illegal wildlife trade. And this photo that you can see here is of a picture of our expert working group. So these are people that represent these different countries listed. They represent different agencies from their governments and also the private sector. And we met with them and worked with them in each of their countries throughout a period of 3 years. And then at the end of that process, we brought the trainers from within those different countries together for a 2-week intensive deep dive, a sort of academy into how to address the illegal wildlife trade. And this academy was very much focused on ports, sea, and airports. And within the training, we looked at everything from how to develop a counter-corruption strategy in an airport, through to how to develop understanding around the sorts of concealment methods that traffickers use. And we also discussed things like the sorts of technology that are being developed that can be used by border officials to detect and track the movement of wildlife. So this was a very important project, and one that I consider to be a great success. And actually, it set the foundations for the creation of the conservation agency, of which I now sit as a trustee, of which I'll speak about in just a moment. And before I get there, I'm just going to mention in the very kind introduction that my colleague gave, she mentioned the company Centravis. And Centravis is a new initiative founded earlier this summer, and it's developed an AI technology that captures untapped intelligence in airports and turns that into an understanding of high-risk flights. And it can relate to any type of smuggling. It isn't focused on the illegal wildlife trade, but we are tackling the illegal wildlife trade within our range of focus areas. So it can do two things. It can generate an understanding of the smuggling routes and the sorts of profiles that belong to smuggling through airports, and it can also help with live detection of items that are passing through airports. So ultimately, it can increase your intelligence picture on smuggling routes, high-risk flights, modus operandi, and concealment methods, leading to increased seizures and arrests. And it's been designed in such a way that it also helps minimize corruption risks inside airports. So these are some of the subjects that the AI is being trained to detect. And then lastly, I've just mentioned this already, and I'd like to welcome Michael, the Executive Director of Synergy Initiative, just to wave his hand and say hello to you all. Michael was my co-project leader in the WOBILEB project. I was leading on behalf of Traffic, and he was leading on behalf of another organization. And he's the founder and visionary of the Earth Synergy Initiative, of which many of the staff that belong to the Earth Synergy Initiative were within the WOBILEB program. So, Michael, if you could please come and join us.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for this opportunity to say hello to everybody. As Chris mentioned, ACI was formed from staff of this previous USAID program, and our first objective was combating wildlife crime in West Africa. So we helped ECOWAS develop its regional strategy for doing that. And when USAID, our program was ended in March, we felt that this work we had been doing for 10 years should not be lost. So we created this NGO and entered into a partnership with Centravis and with another Ghanaian consulting firm called Kanko. And at this point, we were pleased yesterday to join the Ghana Airport Company Limited on the occasion of their Safety and Security Week, and to give a talk about risks and solutions for a safe, green, 24-hour airport economy. So we will be coordinating with Ghana Airport Company Limited to support training programs and strengthening their systems for fighting wildlife crime. And we intend to also coordinate with the Airport Council's International Africa chapter. So we're really happy to be part of this group, this webinar, and we look forward to further interactions over time. So thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Lovely to see you. And that's me finished. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much, Michael. I think we are running out of time because we started a bit late, so we'll be a bit quick. I want to say thank you to Chris for that comprehensive look in terms of strategy and collaboration, including technology advancement against the wildlife trafficking. Good pointers in terms of how ICAO legislation has mostly looked at physical security for passenger, but also very encouraging to see that we have about 14,000 players trying to work around environmental conservation. The call for us to build resilient strategies which look at capacity building, all that is really appreciated, Chris, including wrapping up with the AI technology that is being introduced to help us curb wildlife trafficking through our airports. Thank you so much. And quickly, I'll call upon our second speaker, who is Nasilele. Nasilele has already been introduced. She'll give us an advocate's point of view, communication, community engagement in terms of what they've done to curb wildlife trafficking through our airports. Nasilele, please, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Falesi, and thank you, Yassine, for the introduction. I'm just going to share my presentation just in a moment. Okay, thank you so much once more, and thank you, ACI, for the opportunity to discuss this very important topic, and that needs really a multifaceted approach. And greetings, everyone. As already been introduced, my name is Miriam, and I work for Wildlife Crime Prevention in Zambia. Just to begin my presentation, I will start by, obviously, African countries, including Zambia, are not losing their wildlife products or natural resources because of... Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
I can
you.
hear.
Okay, thank you so much. So African countries, including Zambia, are not losing their wildlife resources or natural resources because they lack value, but we are losing these resources because their value is underestimated and also misunderstood and mostly ignored. For many communities, as well as some decision makers and institutions, they understand that wildlife or natural resources are self-replenatory or they can replenish, they can be regenerated. That is not true. And also, they always think maybe resources can actually be taken away and still nothing would happen or no consequences. But unfortunately, consequences are true and also they exist and they expose themselves to impacting our ecosystems, our communities, and not just our wildlife populations, but also affecting our country's economy. And it's very important that we should focus more on how important our wildlife is and why the need for protection. Here at WCP, we recognize the fact that illegal wildlife trafficking is not a simple issue that can be solved through one intervention, but it is a complex, interconnected challenge driven by many factors, including limited knowledge or awareness. It is a complex, interconnected challenge, and also we take a very holistic and multifaceted approach, working across critical pillars. I will mention at least 3 critical pillars of which we do a lot of more activities and more strategies, but we support law enforcement to stop trafficking at its source. We also strengthen legal processes to ensure cases are well handled and justice is served. And another thing that I do entirely for my living and every day is driving behavior change innovation so communities understand the true value of wildlife and choose protection over exploitation. Through these pillars at WCP, we ensure that protection happens from the field to the courtroom to the community, closing the gaps that traffickers often exploit. So here with me today, I will be highlighting the With More Alive campaign, one of WCP's key initiatives in tackling illegal wildlife trafficking among travelers in the aviation industry. And thank you so much, Chris, for also highlighting the importance of a civil society or conservation organization in conserving or working towards building capacity in the aviation industry. Unfortunately, illegal wildlife trafficking is a global issue that drives or distracts our ecosystems. It is the most destructive. Activity in the black market, which ranks fourth largest globally. Can imagine how big that is. And this illegal trafficking drives our population declines of species in our protected areas, and also we lose as countries. It undermines ecosystems and local economies, which our local economies depend on. Our local communities access opportunities through tourism and conservation, through employment and also infrastructure development, and also in contribution to our economical improvements in our country. And unfortunately, this global crisis results into between 7 to 23 billion US dollars annually, and also impacts 4,000 species. Zambia's geographical position and also biodiversity makes it a source and a transit route hub. This means, other than wildlife coming from other parts of the country, and Zambia also positions itself as a source where our wildlife is actually affected by the illegal trafficking of wildlife products. So some of the products don't just pass through our country, but they also are coming from our country. So Zambia borders 8 countries which have access to our 4 international borders. So over time, WCP and other partners took time to understand trafficking incidents or how rampant illegal trafficking of wildlife is. And this has been done way back beyond 2014. But from the period of 2014 and 2024, we did identify notable trafficking incidents, including ivory being traced in Heathrow, but traced back to Zambia, and also live turtles disguised as fruits at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport, at Zambia's biggest international airport. So there's a lot more products that go through the airport other than ivory, other than live animals. There's also other things that go through our airport. So for over 10 years, from 2009 and 2019, airports globally recorded about 2,008 wildlife seizures, which amounted to 75,000 kg. And in this period as well, there was an identification of 5.5 million live animals. So wildlife is not just transported as products or processed products, it's also transported as live animals or live species, because some countries or some places, they require wildlife alive and not dead, and also not as products, because they're more valuable if they are alive. But beyond understanding illegal wildlife trafficking chains, we also explored other ways we could collaborate, and other ways we could make sure that the messaging is put across. We realized that the people who would make the biggest difference were the people meeting air passengers every day. These were the staff in the aviation industry. So we took time and trained at least check-in officers, immigration security, and baggage handlers as well to better understand illegal wildlife trade, how bad it is and how it impacts our wildlife populations and also communities. Through this interaction or training, we managed to capacitate the staff with detective irregularities skills, which involve sight, sound, and intuition. So someone can actually tell if someone is nervous just by looking at them and seeing how they are behaving. If they are not making any movements, they're just sitting in a very stationed and fixed position without moving, because most oftentimes some people bundle themselves with wildlife products on their body, maybe using sellotape and adhesives, which you can't really detect or recognize. They won't have them in bags, but they could possibly have them on their body. Sound as well. We've seen and read stories of how wildlife has been sedated or immobilized in order to make it unconscious or in order to make it inactive so that it's not detected. So we taught the staff on how to pay attention to sounds, unusual sounds, and be able to detect wildlife. Intuitions as well, if someone is putting on a puffer jacket in warmer weathers, you probably want to question that and investigate further. Maybe they could be having some illegal products on them, wildlife products and other things. Other than that, we did also train the staff on how to apply wildlife regulations, how to detect, on how to also prove that the documentation, because it's not all the time that wildlife is trafficked illegally, but there's also ways that you could traffic wildlife legally. So we taught the staff on how to identify authentic documentations and what kind of proper documentation is needed to transport wildlife products or wildlife itself. So through this interaction and collaboration with the Zambia Airport Corporations Limited, we successfully managed to conduct 5 trainings across Zambia's 4 international airports. And these trainings benefited over 200 staff, and 21 future trainers were certified as well. And proudly, Falesi is among the 35 trainers, and she did conduct a lot of trainings across the country. And this created a very a line of defense in the aviation industry, the first ever line of defense in Zambia in the aviation industry. So that wasn't all. The training wasn't just where we ended, but we also made sure that we went beyond the training and also forewarn or alert air travelers on the importance of wildlife and how serious Zambia takes its wildlife in protecting it and making sure that it is alive because it is indeed worth more alive. So in 2022, in partnership with the Department of National Parks and Wildlife and the Zambia Airports Corporations Limited, we launched the Worth More Alive campaign, which aims to raise public awareness about the importance of wildlife and also where to report illegal wildlife activities happening in the airport, and encourage public reporting as well as reduce tolerance for trafficking wildlife products. So this campaign comprises of at least posters across 4 international airports, life-size installations of wildlife species that are not limited to the only ones endangered as a result of trafficking. So we have the elephant, the rhino, and the leopard. We also have a reporting mechanism where people have access to a mobile number that they can call, or a person that's stationed in the airport who can help them if they identified any illegal activities happening with regards to wildlife protection. The posters also were not just in English, but were multilingual message posters where other people can be accommodated and read and appreciate about wildlife protection in Zambia. Our work definitely goes without mentioning. We make sure that we make sure we measure what truly changed as a result of the intervention and collaboration. So we made sure that we evaluated the campaign a year later after implementation. And with this evaluation, we measured awareness of endangered species among air travelers. How aware were they, or how aware are they in terms of wildlife protection, and also what wildlife species do they think are highly threatened as a result of trafficking? And also we asked them if they could recognize the campaign and its visibility and be able to use the different ways that they could reach out to law enforcement in letting them about wildlife protection and also about the wildlife illegal activities happening in the airport. We also tried to measure how the campaign and the impact can be linked to the impact or results of the campaign, and also how to better improve the campaign. Our key findings were quite encouraging. We found that there was increase in recognition of the elephant. Other than that, something that was really striking to us and something that we've really explored this year is the recognition or the awareness of the pangolin species, which are highly endangered because of their skulls and sometimes for their meat. This rose at least 300%, which is very overwhelming and encouraging for the campaign, and also driving the next step of the campaign and how to increase visibility. So our key findings were that males showed high awareness with need for more, so there was need for more inclusive messaging to encompass also females. And also international travelers could recognize the various different multilingual visuals that were included in the cafe. And people who visited often, when asked, people say they were visiting our country because of its beautiful wildlife. We could see that there was a high awareness of people who visited our protected areas with the campaign. With the lessons learned, what we learned is that the combination of staff training and public campaign really worked to create a sustainable loop for vigilance and accountability. And also with the visual engagement that we collaborated or that we connected with the posters, the life-size installations, it triggered curiosity and dialogue as well, of which we've seen a lot of attraction, a lot of interest in wanting to know more about the campaign, but also wanting to know more about Zambia's strategies in protection of wildlife. So the Work More Alive is not just a national initiative. It has emanated into a global example, showing the global world of communities, and that Zambia's airports are now allies in the global fight against wildlife. And also proudly in 2023, the Zambia Airport Corporations Limited and WCP won the Environmental and Sustainability Development Award through the Airport Council International, something that we are still really proud of and still talk about, and showing that our campaign is really impactful and that also Zambia's visibility on the global map. Our way forward with the campaign is that we need to scale up the campaign's visibility, putting more engaging awareness materials. I should mention here that we are working towards installing a 2-in-1 installation of a pangolin installation, which will highlight the 2 types of species found in Zambia, the tree and the ground pangolin. So we will be unveiling these probably early next year, if not before the end of the year. And also increasing more, this will also result into addressing our findings of our evaluation, which updating messaging to strengthen awareness of lesser known threatened wildlife species, the pangolin. And we would also want going forward to increase linking awareness with measurable behavior outcomes, which is increased reporting of wildlife activities happening in the airport when they happen, and also reduce trafficking items of wildlife products at the source. So the Work More Alive campaign in Zambia has successfully transformed the country's international airports, especially the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport, into a frontline defense against wildlife crime. The achievement is based on a successful multi-agency model that combines targeted sensory focused training with a compelling public awareness campaign. So the campaign is measurable, evidence is significant, as we have seen a recognition of highly threatened wildlife species like the pangolin, elephants as well. And it's really great that we are working towards this, and indeed wildlife is worth more alive, and Zambia is proving it, one airport at a time, a collaborative model uniting aviation, law enforcement, and conservation. Thank you so much. That was my presentation.
Thank you so much, Nasilele. Very insightful indeed. The behavioral efforts taken to ensure that you send a message in the airport through visual effects. I also appreciate the measurements of what was done. I think it's important to measure whatever we are doing, how impactful it is out there. Thank you for the statistics shared, serious statistics there in terms of the live animals that are being detected, which calls for more action across. Quickly, we go to Chris. Chris is from Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, a fire officer has introduced, and he's going to give us a practical perspective of an airport operator, how an airport operator can join hands in combating illegal wildlife trafficking through the airport. Jeffrey, you can go ahead and take it up.
Thank you, Chrissy. I'm Geoffrey from Kenya Airports Authority. I'm going to shortly share a presentation. I want to thank the ACI for this opportunity to present this participant. I want to check on the background of illegal wildlife trade, which is a major global challenge involving illegal imports and export of protected wild animals and plant species. There is also a rising demand for those wildlife products, particularly part of Asia, which is pushing numerous species toward extinction. Some of these are the black rhinos, the African elephants, and the African pangolins. Beyond the health crisis, wildlife trafficking also has a far-reaching environmental, social, and economic impact, which undermines the efforts of achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 15.7, which aims to take organizational action to end poaching and trafficking of wildlife protected species of flora and fauna. And by addressing both demands and supplies of illegal wildlife products, wildlife poaching seriously threatens biodiversity and conservation as a whole. In April 2019, Kenya Airports Authority joined more than 100 transport sector companies who confirmed their support to combat wildlife trafficking by signing the United for Wildlife Transport Export Farmington Palace Declaration, which focus on securing information sharing system for transport industry players to receive critical information about high-risk routes, method of transportation, and also to notify relevant law enforcement authorities of cargoes suspected of containing these illegal wildlife products and way of accepting them. During our we check on the network of illegal wildlife trade network in aviation. And the network starts from poachers, let's go to the traffickers who are the shippers. From there, the freight forwarders also are interacting with the poachers towards facilitating of these illegal wildlife products. From the freight forwarders, the cargo are received in cargo terminals, maybe stated by the employees or the airport security. Airport security and the ground staff. So some of the measures that have been put is to improve on the airport security and collaboration with other stakeholders like the custom, airlines, ground staff, so that we can minimize the effect of facilitation of these illegal wildlife trade products. And that is basically the illegal wildlife trade network in aviation, where the exporting country and the receiving country need to coordinate further and be able to put measures that can be able in assisting to minimize this effect. Measures that were put in place as Kenya Airports Authority, that is Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and Moi International Airport in Kenya, is collaboration between Kenya Airports Authority and the Kenya Wildlife Service, which are the main mandated institution in controlling wildlife activities in the country. This in terms of screening and detection of illegal animal trophies. We have also come up with development of standard operating procedures in screening and inspecting, that is searching of package to prevent the carriage of any unauthorized or prohibited wildlife product on board a commercial aircraft. Also, the country has established a law courts within the fraternity of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport facility for ease of prosecution of traffickers. We have also carried out promotion of information sharing by airlines. Our main airlines is Kenya Airways on prohibition and consequences on illegal trafficking of wildlife. Some of the detection canals that are used by our Kenya Wildlife Services to bolster the organization efforts in combating this illegal trafficking are the sniffer canines. And the Kenya Wildlife Services have two types of that, which have proved to be great assistance toward controlling these malice. That is the Malinois and the Springer sniffer breeds. The unit, that is Kenya Wildlife Service, has a total of 9 sniffers canines in our airport and are primarily trained in detecting ivory, rhino horns, and pangolin scale. Their interception have proved that these highly trained canines have a capability to detect even the smallest amount of wildlife contrabands, like ivory pangolins and pieces of rhino horns. So the sniffer team are deployed within our airports round the clock of 24-hour basis with 13 personnel specialized in sniffer canine handling. Through implementing these measures, the organization has made a tremendous achievement in reducing illegal wildlife trade cases at our airports, and we are focused on achieving zero tolerance policy of illegal wildlife trade. The court at JK, for example, has ensured prompt prosecution of arrested traffickers and has thus deterred illegal wildlife trade through our airports, which has really reduced the trade. K also has joined global efforts by signing the Mountain Palace Declaration, as earlier said, under the United for Wildlife, committing to stop wildlife trafficking through airports. We have also strengthened our security with the sniffer canine units in partnership with Kenya Wildlife Service to detect the ivory, scales, bushmeat, and other wildlife products. With the introduction of the court within the airport has really assisted in fast-tracking court cases and has speeded up that prosecution of wildlife trafficking and related crime. And since its inception, the unit has been able to recover almost over 200 tons of raw and worked ivory, mostly in form of bangles, necklaces, chopsticks, smoking sticks, pendants, carvings, beads, and rhino horns, while on transit mostly to the Asian countries. Other recoveries that we have made include cheetah teeth, assorted claws, lion teeth, pangolins, scales worth over 6 million Kenya shillings. The team, in liaison with data law enforcement, that is the police, the custom, has been able to intercept and arrest several poaching suspects in protected areas and arrested 102 illegal traffickers. Most cases were successfully prosecuted and heavily fined, which has reduced the impact. We have also created awareness campaigns at our airport through posters, announcements, public education initiative, urging travelers not to buy or carry illegal wildlife products. If you are traveling with Kenya Airways in their tickets, they are also partnering with us so that they can run such messages and initiatives in their tickets. We are implementing a zero-tolerance policy and internal procedures to prevent such smuggling through passenger and cargo channels. And most of our security staffs, through the collaboration with Kenya Wildlife Services, the Kenya Police, Customs, and other stakeholders, has been trained and created awareness on the impact of this illegal wildlife trade. This collaboration with agencies has also been put in place so that they can be able to share intelligence and conduct joint operation. Like last year, there was an ministerial commitment that launched an airport charter whereby all the agencies working within the airport reports to one command, that's the airport manager, and they're able to coordinate and share intelligence information on need basis, which had really bring some of the effective changes that we have seen in our airports. Live Queen Anne's case. In April 2025, 4 people, 2 Bulgarian, 1 Vietnamese, and 1 Kenyan pleaded guilty at JKI courts for attempting to smuggle about 5,000 live queens ants. These live queen ants were packed in 2,244 modified test tubes and syringes designed to keep them alive for up to 2 months, showing sophistication in trafficking. That's a live case that has really shown that there is great improvement in our management and control of illegal wildlife trades in our airport. And I'll say thank you. That's my brief summary for the presentation. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for that presentation, giving us a perspective of the airport. A highlight of the network in the aviation industry was very cardinal, because even when we are talking about an airport, combating wildlife trafficking through the airport, it requires a whole network to play a part. So giving us an idea of this whole network was good to show that everybody is a player in playing a role, from the cargo handler, the airport operator, and everybody else in the airport community. Also appreciating the standard operating procedures that we have at Jomo Kenyatta in the International Airport. And interestingly, the code. I think the code sends a strong message out there that JKIA is not there to play in terms of tackling this matter. Thank you so much. I'll quickly take a question or two, maybe just 2 questions. I don't have any questions right now in the chat box, but if there's any question, you can raise your hand. As we are waiting for that question, I will pose a question to Nasilele. Nasilele, what has been the most effective way of communicating and training to ensure that we tackle this problem? What has been more effective for you?
What has been very effective for us at the WCP and also different partners is collaboration or collaborating with partners. So having different and multifaceted approach to tackling this trade. So having law enforcement, having the airports also in partnership, and also communication, but also making the community or the target audience part of the campaign that has been really effective. So as you would have seen on the installations or through the presentation, the installations are very innovative and very interactive in nature. They just don't carry information, but they have ways to encourage people to take pictures and take them over around the world, like upload them on their socials, share them with family and friends. And also with regards to training, what has really been working is identifying the loopholes or the gaps in where information is lacking. So recently we're conducting, throughout the evaluation that we conducted, there's need for more amplification and also visibility of the campaign. So we've taken time going back to the people we trained or the staff that we trained to understand better what ways or what things that they need further. So, and we will be crowning them as ambassadors going forward, and they'll be able to still carry on with the message and still raise awareness among air travelers.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. A quick one to Chris. What is the major gap that you see in terms of policy for us to tackle this problem of illegal wildlife trade? What is the major gap that you see?
Well, specifically to airports, I think I touched on it very briefly in the presentation, but there are some practical constraints in working in an airport, and the main one is the time frame in which you have. So really, you have to look at the trafficking in the longer picture, not just in the context of the airport. And this is why multi-agency working is so important. And it might be that the intelligence that's derived around this isn't from one of the partners that's in the airport. So you really do need a sort of a comprehensive suite of agencies, expertise. It tends to be the case in many illegal wildlife investigations that information comes from many different sorts of sources, which is unusual for law enforcement. Usually law enforcement has control over its sources in a fairly tight domain, and it can be focused in its actions from that information. So, the big message for me is that if we're going to grow more effective in that small time window, we really do need that multi-agency approach, and we need to look at the problem beyond the airport. So we're ready for that moment when we need to take action in the airport.
Thank you so much, Chris. And for sure, we need that moment where it's a collaborative approach. Everybody plays their role. Lastly, I'll ask I'll ask Jeffrey. Jeffrey, how do you juggle around the need by passengers for a smooth movement through the airport and the requirement for you to conduct thorough security searches, including searching for wildlife trafficking issues?
Firstly, what we have done in our airport is that the issue of collaborating with other agencies, like making sure the Kenya Wildlife Service personnel are on ground in the airport round the clock, they'll be able to assist in screening, especially behind the bags, because they need to screen those bags. So we have collaborated with Kenya Wildlife so that we can be able to provide their canines for screening and also training of our staff, especially the security team, who are the front team in terms of security management of our airports. Most of them have been trained through types of illegal wildlife trades, products that can possibly be found within the airports. And they really worked well in our airports. So there are some bit of challenges like the internal threats, collaboration among staff and other airport users in terms of facilitation of this trade. But most of our processes are well guided by the placed procedures that we have put in place with Kenya Wildlife Services. And we look forward also in our country improving on the legal requirements and regulation that will guide the processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, and I'm sure the AI technology coming with Chris will really help to solve this problem as well. I've seen 1 or 2 questions in the chat box, but apologies, we will not take them because we are about 11 minutes beyond time. What I'll say is that we will share this information and also the addresses for the presenters. You can ask questions directly to the presenters and they'll surely be able to respond to you. So as we close today's session, I would like to say thank you so much to our speakers for their insights and for the important work that they are doing in terms of conservation, technology, and airport operations. I also want to thank all of you who have attended this